So, I was playing some Mario Kart 8 with some friends the other night, and I was losing.
All around me are familiar.
Like, a lot. I'm not very good at the game, but at least I was allowed to pick the next cup. As always for me, it had to be the Banana Cup. No, not because of Donut Plains 3. So close. So close. No, Banana Cup is my go because of Dry Dry Desert, which has undoubtedly been my favorite track going back to when I was a kiddo. Originally from Mario Kart Double Dash in 2003 on the GameCube, I loved this desert biome. Biome? Am I saying that right? It would just be biome or biome? This desert place captured my imagination as a kid. Growing up, I was always one that loved the idea of traveling to exotic locales. I loved action-adventure stories and films. And my dad, being a child of the late 80s and early 90s, served me up the principal character at the center of that genre on film, Indy fucking Jones. And he, too, was moving about these cultures and discovering what was lost, and notably putting them in museums.
That belongs in a museum!
Sometimes. He tried his best, I think. And in a small way, the setting of this track gave me that same feeling of exploration, even if it was just a Mario Kart level. I always loved looking out into the distance to see the massive pyramids going up well into the sky. And there's those pharaohs at the track's opening watching over you, almost beckoning you to race through their archway. There are these giant obelisks pot-marking either side of the track, giving not only obstacles for the player, but that same sense of exploring ruins. And then that twisty sinkhole you can butt your friends into. Okay, it was mostly me being booted into it. That's not important. That's but this time while I was playing, something struck me. Why pyramids? Why use actual landmarks? We're in a world of, Italian plumbers that are killing dinos and fantasy castles and flying ships, and then in the desert there is actual historical landmarks of actual cultures. And then I started thinking about how often they came up. I couldn't really remember playing a Mario game where the deserts didn't have some sort of pyramid, or sphinx, or obelisk, or some nod to Egypt. I started checking, and every game has this. I felt like some sort of weird conspiracy theorist with a thread on a corkboard. I just kept finding pyramids. If there's a desert, it's got a pyramid. Super Mario 64, pyramid. Super Mario 3, pyramids. Super Mario Galaxy, pyramid. Paper Mario in the Thousand-Year Door, got him. Looking over all of these games, it became clear that these Egyptian desert levels were as a part of the Mario formula as any character or mechanic, probably in more iterations of the game than some characters, like a Toad or a Luigi, which is weird. Now you might be wondering, why does that matter? So what if they pretty much all have these Egypt-like levels? It's just a setting that looks cool. Sure, you don't have to care about it, but that's kind of the video, and I'm gonna explain more. You just kind of stop me real quick. But okay, let me pitch it. Why Egyptian icons? This isn't how Mario levels are traditionally designed. Or at least I should say, it's not how the rest of these Mario levels are designed thematically. They follow a pretty different formula than this. I'll use Mario 64 to demonstrate this. Usually the levels are based on some sort of naturally occurring biome, and there's sort of natural associations that pop out of that want to emulate a certain feeling or a certain idea about this biome. In many ways, they operate like genres. These levels have specific objects and color palettes and styles of platforming that are tied to these genres of levels. It's not always so hard and fast, but at least for specific types of levels, only certain things can be there, like looking at the lethal lava land. Lava, okay, makes sense. Metal, we got it, sort of smelting kind of thing, very basic, no cultures. It's just lava and metal, basically. Cool mountain. You got snow, you got some penguins, there's a vague cabin. Yeah, that's just kind of generic. We got it. Bomb's Battlefield. This is the beginning stage in most Mario games. It's just a grassy place, and oh look, we got bombs there. And then there's Shifting Sand Land. And we got the sand, so that makes sense, but at the center is again a pyramid. It takes center stage, is literally the biggest thing there. Instead of the biome dictating some kind of natural association, we have a very specific monumental architecture from one culture being used. Which I think, if you're not questioning that, you might want to think more about why we so deeply associate the pyramids and Egyptian culture with deserts. Especially these deserts. The deserts in Mario games are not portrayals of a biome that is nice. All these have, especially in this specific level in the Shifting Sand Land, is just basically a wasteland, which is much of what these desert locations are effectively presenting. You're not getting here's all these wonderful characters, here's all this luscious greenery, which Egypt does have. It does have, grassy places, and I'm not trying to say that, somehow, the pyramids are not in the desert. And you look at the place around the pyramids, you're going to find something that looks vaguely referential to what you're seeing in these levels. But if we zoom out from these pictures that we see, this kind of fantasized image of the pyramids, Cairo, one of the biggest cities in the Middle East, is right there. This is a tourist trap. This idea of it being this lone, forgotten ruin is just basically marketing. And this is the only time that something so specific architecturally and culturally comes up in these early games. They're kind of making a point about, hey, like these are connected. I'm telling you something about this location because of this landmark. The only other time this really happens is usually in service of fantasy, like the aforementioned bombs, or the flying boat, or those like rock monsters, or like things that just don't exist in any material way whatsoever. So they're not necessarily tied to any specific biome, though there are enemies that are. Now, what's interesting here is that the pyramid is one of the most recognizable icons of Egyptian culture. And when we connect it to this idea of a barren sand wasteland, or more broadly, just deserts in general, it may appear inconsequential at first, but that's not exactly a positive portrayal. One may argue that there are icons for distinct cultures other than like the castles and the dungeons that are situated around the Mushroom Kingdom, which one could point to as being European in style. But like, they aren't the Alhambra, or the Chateau Chambord, or the Windsor Castle. It's never specific. They are always clearly a very general fantasy castle. Like when we look at Peach's castle, I hope that no one's seeing like a austere European castle. That is clearly a like playset of what a medieval castle is like. When we look inside like Bowser's dungeons in the 2D games, these are effectively as generic as a bad fantasy castle can get. But the pyramids and the sphinxes and the obelisks, these are pretty well and truly connected to Egyptian culture. And I think importantly here, this idea of them being generic, or this kind of vagueness that Mario is using, is kind of one of the defining features of what makes a Mario level, whether that be in the mainline games or its numerous spin-offs. It's just how utterly vague these locales are. They want to convey not necessarily a detailed like world. They want to convey a feeling with images and design that is easily digestible. I'm going to refer to these very basic, essentialized images that these Mario levels use as like clip art, as effectively when you go online and you look for a clip art version of some idea or concept, you will get what Mario is using for these locales. So when you look up like a snow mountain or a snowy area, you're gonna get something that pretty much looks like the cool mountain. Looking at Bob-omb's Battlefield, for instance, it feels playful with its brighter palette, with the sky blue and the hills are rolling, the trees are bulky and rounded. And as such, these types of levels are usually what open Mario games. And they always seem to hit that part of my brain that calls for calm and taking your time. You want something kind of onboard the player into where they're not feeling rushed. Like say in comparison to like a Bowser level, you're feeling a little pushed. You want to get out of there. Now when we look back to the shifting sand level, the pyramid is not vague. The pyramids of Giza are clearly being portrayed here. We have obstacles that are wrapped in mummy rags. We have obelisks that are dotted about the map. Now, importantly, these images that we're looking at, these clip art ideas of Egypt, they are specific and they are part of Egyptian iconography and culture, but they don't really tell us about the culture specifically. We're looking at an allusion to a feeling. And the reason why it's here is not because Nintendo is coming up with some new thing, and I hope I wasn't portraying it as they were coming up with some new association, some problematic association on their own. We generally feel like the desert is intrinsically tied to Egyptian culture, and we can see this. It's a great shorthand. Whether it be on Nintendo's earliest handheld or on the Switch, the pyramids tell us that this level is a desert. It's the shorthand, just like penguins in an ice level or bulky trees in a grassland level. There is a lot more to this, and we are going to dive deeper, but the principal issue with this kind of portrayal is that it centralizes our conception of Egypt and the Egyptian people. It becomes not a culture, but a setting, a backdrop for us to act upon it, but it to never act. To use a very basic example, when I say American, what comes to mind? Depending on your feelings about America, it might be negative or positive, but you probably still think of a person, even if it's a person you hate. But when I say Egyptian, I know my first thought goes to the pyramids or the Sphinx. And I would bet that a lot of you see the same thing. Or is that positive to think about a culture by what it created thousands of years ago? Hold on to that thought. One of the most interesting things I found while combing through all these Mario games is that I noted that because of how self-referential the series is, the locales in many ways end up being as defining a part of what makes a Mario game as a Mario or a Bowser. That means that this connection that was made early on between Egyptian culture and the desert as a setting has been continually used over the long decades of Mario's history. It began to define and crystallize what it meant to play a Mario desert level. From this first appearance in Super Mario 2, which notably was a reskin of another Japanese game, it would become the norm going forward by Super Mario 3. A Mario desert level would need Egyptian culture to make it a Mario desert level going forward. This is epitomized with the new Super Mario Bros. Games that would reboot the 2D side-scroller in the mid-2000s. New Super Mario Bros. In 2007 on the DS would ultimately solidify the essence of what a Mario game was, and with it, this association with Egyptian iconography. This game was not a recreation of older games, but a kind of summarization of what a 2D Super Mario game was. Like it became its own version of clip art, of what Mario meant in the culture. Like if you search for Mario right now, that 2007 Mario, those decisions about what makes Mario Mario, that's who we think of. That's the thing that comes to our head when we think of Mario. We don't think of the Super Mario World version of Mario, or we don't think of the Sunshine version of Mario, or the 8-bit version of Mario. The character and series was crystallized at that moment. And like the many examples I've described, its desert levels effectively were just higher res versions of the same pyramids and Egyptian iconography. This also goes further in terms of the two games where players are given the reins to design their own Mario levels with Mario Maker 1 and 2, which again, these desert levels are defined with backgrounds that display large pyramids as backdrops. And often players themselves end up creating pyramids in these levels. So not only have the creators been sticking to this rulebook, the players themselves have come to identify these desert sand worlds as the place for Egyptian pyramids in Mario games. Now, I'm sure there are some of you that have been wondering why I've been avoiding discussing the most recent Mario platformer, Super Mario Odyssey. And I'm sure there are some that had already gone to the comments to pull a gotcha, pointing out that the new Super Mario Odyssey actually doesn't have Egyptian pyramids. Don't worry, I got you. And I don't want to make it sound bad, but it's kind of bad. The differences in evolution of this desert level in Odyssey, to me, is the most illustrative of just how out of whack and problematic the Mario series is in relation to the cultures they decide to portray. So, in Super Mario Odyssey, the sand level or desert level is called Sand Kingdom. And it actually does attempt to subvert the conventions of the basic sand level of the Mario series historically. Our NPC companion Cappy even refers to this difference as soon as we step off the ship, wondering, "But why is it so cold? I thought deserts were supposed to be hot." Almost as if the developers want us to know that even the feeling of this desert level is new, even in terms of one's senses. When we finally start exploring the level, one will quickly notice the stark differences between the basic Mario sand level and this one. There's no beating sun, instead a cold moon. The sand is notably red tinted and kind of glitters with the movement of the light. Crystals dot the landscape instead of obelisks. And then as we approach the village in front of us, we see where Odyssey's developers chose to center their influences culturally for this level. Instead of Egyptian, they have pulled from Latin American cultures. Specifically for this village, a riff on the Day of the Dead, with the townspeople being literal skeleton creatures, while they wear sombreros, ponchos, and have maracas. All of them have maracas. They don't even play them. Wow, Nintendo. You just really know how to do it, man. You just really know how to like dial it up, really get out of your comfort zone, you're just so fucking culturally competent. I'm not even if one were to Google Mexican culture, this again is the general clip art portrayal you'd get. So, okay, was writing the script and was honestly just thinking about this theoretically if someone had done this, and I was but I thought I should actually try it, to have some visual, and it was exactly, yep, it's there. God, And then beyond the town to the north lay large, ominous pyramids that are vaguely reminiscent of the step pyramids from the cultures of Latin America. I describe these as being vague because of the haphazard way that the developers chose to pick and choose iconography from these cultures. The first stone gateway has the face, for instance, of an Olmec head, which, it's a proto-culture that is not directly associated with other cultures that are kind of being riffed on here, and was thousands of years before, and this head is everywhere, and it is also the main boss, and the boss sounds like this. Oh my god. I hate that it sounds like this. I hate that I have to, God damn it. Then, there's the use of stone animal statues that vaguely resemble those found in Aztec sites. And there is stonework that is taken from Mayan and Incan and Aztec cultures, which, importantly, are not the same cultures. Though they are often portrayed as interchangeable, these cultures were not only thousands of miles apart, they were at times centuries apart as well. We also have Easter Island heads with earrings. Dope. I guess we're just really, dope. Now, one might make the argument that the developers were simply being creative, that their choice to mix indigenous cultures was one towards following their imagination and not trying to make a historical document. I appreciate where that sentiment is coming from, and I'm not one to limit creativity, nor does Nintendo have an obligation to make a documentary about the cultures of Latin America in their platforming video game that stars an Italian plumber fighting a dino bad boy. Though, I do want to make the argument that the choice to mix and match these cultures was not done out of some stroke of creativity, but instead kind of laziness. They ended up using the same cultural shorthands that their audience would be familiar with. The shallowness of these types of depictions was best articulated by Dr. Felicia Lopez, assistant professor at the University of California, Merced, when she was recently dissecting the film Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull on the podcast Pop Culture Detective Audiophiles.
So we have iconography that is directly pulled out of these ancient texts that are from central Mexico. And we see iconography pulled directly out of classical Mayan texts from hundreds of years earlier than that Aztec text and from thousands of miles away. And then we'll also see architecture from different Mayan sites. And then we'll see that in the context of it being a Peruvian site. So we see this strange hodgepodge. It kind of becomes one monolithic culture. And so when we see media representations of the Incans, we don't really see any difference between those representations and representations that we see of the so-called Mayans or Aztecs in different movies.
But if they put, part of the Acropolis backwards, everyone would be like, whoa, we learned about that in school, so that's wrong. But we don't learn about these things. We don't learn about ancient Mesoamerica. We don't learn about ancient South America.
To further showcase this, we can see the clearly different approach and portrayal with how American culture is showcased in the level Metro Kingdom versus the Sand Kingdom level. New Donk City. Obviously, it's inspired by New York City and is in many ways similarly following a clip art understanding of this specific slice of American culture. Though unlike the portrayals of indigenous cultures, there's none of the strange mix and matching of the cultures throughout the city. Like using Dr. Lopez's point again, the portrayal is not one where we see European architecture creep in, or, say, landmarks from other big cities in North America. We don't see an arch or a Golden Gate Bridge. This is specifically riffing on New York City as a thematic underpinning onto itself. Only nod away from this being a cartoon version of NYC is, I guess, the inclusion of the T-Rex and the variety levels that don't really have a thematic theme, and I don't really want to count those because those are seen in all of the worlds and are usually don't have a thematic theme. And think about this then, if creativity should be of utmost importance, they seemingly didn't get creative with the American culture portrayed. And there's also some troubling design decisions made in terms of how the characters of these two worlds were portrayed. Again, the Sand Kingdom's people are literally just Day of the Dead inspired creatures that all wear the same attire and all carry the same stereotypical instrument. Now, the denizens of New Donk City are just people, regular people. They have actual normally proportioned human bodies, they have a diversity of faces, body types, clothing, genders. They get to be people and not caricatures of their culture. Many of these citizens also take up instruments as well, but instead of it being one stereotypical instrument that is seemingly wedded to their hands for no reason, those that play instruments in New Donk City are firstly actually playing music and have a wide diversity of instruments. Another point to take into account is the apparent gap technologically between the two portrayals. The Sand Kingdom's people get a small little town with a few power lines, with ultimately the ruins behind them taking the focus. And this is not new at all. Like in many portrayals of indigenous people of Latin America, the focus is their exotic past. That is, in this telling, notably dead, ruins of itself.
You're just reminding me of another trope that pops up all over the place, and this is these lost civilizations, right? These lost cities. People talk about it all the time. Oh, the Mayans. People ask me all the time, oh, you study ancient Mesoamericans. Whatever happened to the Mayans? And I say, what happened to the Mayans? I mean, there's 8 million Mayans today, okay? Go talk to a Mayan, what happened to the Mayans? They're still around, there's tons of them. Same thing with the Nahua people, right? We know that small group, or the Aztecs, but Nahua people, there are over 2.5 million Nahua people still around today. And they're all over the place. So there's huge indigenous populations in California, actually, where I am. So, these people are still around. They still exist. They're not gone. Their languages are still alive. A lot was destroyed in colonization. A lot has been replaced with forgeries, as we've been talking about. But those cultures are still very much alive, and in a lot of ways, very much thriving these days.
Donk City, on the other hand, is a fully breathing city where the player is constantly surrounded by people that are actively participating in the world, commenting on the world, doing a variety of activities around it. Like a city with people, like with actual people? That'd be nice if the other one had that. Critics would praise this level endlessly for being so creative.
And then, of course, there's the Metro Kingdom, or New Donk City, which is definitely the coolest of all the kingdoms, and I think it's because it's weird and doesn't make sense. Never in a million years have I ever imagined Mario running around a city resembling Manhattan. It's just so weird to see cartoony-looking Mario running around next to, normal people. It doesn't make any sense, but I think that's part of the fun.
Of all the disparate lands Mario visits in his Odyssey, the urban-themed Metro Kingdom is my favorite. We've never seen anything like the semi-realistic look of New Donk City in a Mario game before.
And though I would agree, at least thematically, it's new for the series, though there are cart levels that are in cities, it's again the most basic idea of a New York City landscape. If this was any other platformer, we would have had a meh or negative reaction, like we did when Sonic for 20 years used normal-sized people for its NPCs in his 3D games. What the fuck?
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. Intel has told us there are at least 7.
Okay, I already see one. Give him. Okay.
They're the same picture.
Remember when we all said that was just kind of weird, but now Mario does it and it's like, whoa. Incredibly basic platforms and basic imagery of a city, it's groundbreaking. Bringing this back to the obsessive use of pyramids as shorthand for these sand levels, it's honestly laughable in concept to me that the creative evolution of the desert level was to go from one culture that created pyramids to another that created pyramids. And I guess also turning it upside down? Okay. I love the fact that it's not even this world's version of a pyramid. No, it's specifically labeled as an inverted pyramid, which fine. It just seems silly a little bit. Like if someone would question it, be like, why is it upside down? It's inverted. Oh, dope. This association with the Mario series of games that has developed over 3 decades of pyramids having to be in their desert levels was so strong that the creative decision was not made to put new types of structures there as the focal point or completely rethink what a desert level should look like, but instead the decision was made to innovate on the type of pyramid it was? If the developers were truly being so creative with their use of cultures, why not put the skyscrapers of the Metro Kingdom in the deserts? Or any number of architectural influences, or just something completely out there, like some fantasy craziness like some other levels had. Why did there have to be pyramids in the desert? Well, because it's a Mario game. Mario games have always had pyramids in their desert levels. And the reason why Mario levels do that is because we associate the pyramids with the desert. This association is born from us. These clip art mental concepts of the world and its diversity of cultures are not new. Nintendo and its developers are not making new problematic statements about the different cultures they are portraying. Instead, they are in many ways simply building their worlds with the basic ideas and images that come to mind when we think of these ideas and concepts. If I were to say New York City, some rough sketch of Metro Kingdom would be the one that would come to mind for you, most likely. If I were to ask what comes to mind if they had created an Incan-inspired level, what would that look like? What comes to mind? How about the Aztecs? The Mayans? Ultimately, the great majority of people couldn't tell me much of anything, because the basic concept of these wildly different cultures we all have, or generally have, is one where they are all the same, a blur of a culture we don't quite understand. That's why the Sand Kingdom looks like that, because the average person wouldn't be able to give you something better than the haphazard mix of these cultures found in that level. That's an issue. There's often an association with Odyssey and the Mario series in general that its worlds are timeless. To me, that feeling is not one of being timeless, but that instead it's simply giving you what you already know, what already feels right. In conclusion here, the fact that we have these clip art mental images about the world that lack nuance is not in of itself a failing. We all have to start from some basic, flawed understanding of a topic. A point of reference from where we can expand others' points of view, as well as have common spaces where others can progress, as well as have common spaces where we can start from and others can take us and help us deepen our knowledge about a topic. The problem is, these incomplete mental images are too often the only images most people will ever see.
There's been plenty of research, especially coming out of USC with Annenberg, talking about the complete failure to represent not only Native people, but Latinos and Latinas as well, right? So the people who are the diverse descendants of the people we're talking about today. And since there's a complete lack of representation, that means that what we do get ends up feeding into what people believe they know about Indigenous people and people of Indigenous descent. They end up thinking that they accomplished very little, that they don't have a rich history. And so what representation we do get tends to be homogenized, it tends to be inaccurate, it tends to be from the European perspective, it tends to vilify them, belittle them. I mean, this is a really big problem. And so from an outsider perspective, it perpetuates these racist notions. And from an insider perspective, so people who identify with these cultures or who see them as part of their heritage are more likely to be ashamed and to distance themselves from these representations.
Ultimately informs how we treat those cultures and the people that are a part of them. If you see Egyptian culture as just being something that's ruins, or a forgotten past, or just something that's in the desert that has very little meaning, I doubt you're going to think very much about the people that live there today. Especially if the image that came to mind when I was first talking about the pyramids was that mysterious, by itself, lonesome pyramids, instead of this image that's honestly much better, where we see people, actual people, and how they live their lives right next to their past. And importantly, they're living their present. Thanks for watching. For anyone interested in learning more about these vibrant, diverse cultures, I've left below an extensive list of resources that I've curated for my own research I had done during my undergrad in history, as well as a reading list of my professors who are experts in the discipline regarding these cultures. I really appreciate you watching this, and if you got something out of this video essay, I'd like you to consider supporting me on Patreon. I'd also like to thank my Patreon supporter, Daniel Witz, for his contribution.